Good morning. I'd like to start by asking you guys to imagine, shouldn't be too hard, being a college student, having a job, possibly working for a small business or small company. Some of us might not make enough money to pay for a lot of things, maybe rent, car insurance, food, maybe. And then imagine one day you're approached by someone and they tell you that every month you're going to be required to pay for the whole year for something that you didn't ask for, you don't want, and you don't need. I asked you guys to imagine, but for a lot of us, that's not really something we need to imagine. Since 2014, the government passed a mandate that required all US citizens or legal residents to sign up for health insurance. Since 2014, that mandate was implemented, and since then it has actually been repealed, but there's still a lot of advocates for that kind of system in the United States. Today I'd like to hopefully answer some questions about a healthcare system that's universal, some of the problems that come with it when it comes to monetary, whether it's on the government or the people that actually pay for it, which is us, and some of the disadvantages with the quality of care. So quality of care, something that's really important to Americans. If we pay for it, we kind of want the best. For the United States, a lot of advocates use Canada as an example for a system that works. That is, if Canada's system actually worked. According to the Fraser Institute, which is a Canadian entity that supplies the government with facts about the welfare of people in Canada, as well as the effect of policy that Canada implements. They found that around most procedures in Canada take about 21 and a half weeks for somebody that has a medically necessary treatment. It takes about 21 and a half weeks for that person to get treatment. That's about 5.5 months, which is about half a year. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the hospital, but I've never been told that you're gonna have to wait half a year to get treatment. And this type of treatment is not uncommon treatment. It's not heart transplants or liver transplants or anything like that. It's common things like CT scans, x-rays, things like that. People are waiting about 5.5 months for that kind of treatment. Now, a common argument or counter-argument to these kind of statistics is that people in Canada actually choose longer wait times. But the survey also found that physicians reported that only 11.5% of people were in that wait list because they requested or because they were postponed. So these numbers kind of show that these wait times aren't a product of people wanting longer wait times. They're a product of a system that's handled by the government. Another issue that comes up with universal health care is the money. With universal health care, it mandates people to pay into the system, and that money is then redistributed to people that can afford it. And the way the system stays afloat is by taking that money from people that don't use the service, despite the fact that you're still paying for it. You might not use it, you might not need it, but you're still paying into it. That money is then redistributed to people that need it. And it might sound like a good idea. You might think to yourself, you know, a government paying for something that you might need at some point sounds like a pretty good idea, but at the end of the day, the people that are paying for it is still you. Refusing to pay for health insurance can come with around $2,000 worth of fines. Now, this was when the system was implemented. It has since been repealed, but there's still a lot of people asking for the system to be brought back. The system requires that businesses, according to Keith Hall, which is the Congressional Budget Office Director, the Congressional Budget Office is actually an entity in the United States that provides Congress with a budget for the year, or at least predictions on how much something is going to cost within the next at least 10 years. They predicted that Universal health care would cost the government around $1.34 trillion in the next 10 years. That's about $110 billion when it started in around 2014, every year. Since then, since the repeal, they've actually concluded that in the next 10 years, we're gonna save about $114 billion every year. So we're making that money back now that it's been repealed. And it seems like a pretty good idea to keep it away because that money is not money that we have to spend. So that money would be added to the deficit that's already in this country. But this kind of universal health care doesn't just affect people that pay into it, like you and me. It doesn't just affect the money you have in your pocket. It doesn't just affect the money that you earn every month. It also affects jobs. So businesses, according to the ACA, which is the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare or the universal health care in the United States, forces businesses that have more than 50 employees to supply health care for its employees. Now, when you force a business to supply something, you take away the choice. So before the mandate, a lot of businesses were using health care as an incentive for employees. They would also use affordable care or the affordable care provided by businesses as a roundabout way of getting kind of like a tax breaks for employees. They would do this by providing health insurance for employees and lowering the minimum wage. So you're not being paid as much, but that money's going back into your healthcare. So because it's going back to you through healthcare, that money is not being taxed by the government because it's not going directly to employees. Now that it's a mandate, along with the raise in minimum wage, you're taking the choice away from businesses to provide such service. The money you're getting every month is still being taxed by the government, and now you're being forced to pay for your own insurance after you get paid every month. Now, if the money or the quality of care is not enough to convince anyone about why universal health care might not be the best option, then we can also look about the implications that a system that forces people to give away their choice brings. So, I don't know about you guys, but I like to eat the stuff that I earn. I feel like I've earned it. If I work for it, it's mine. I don't want it taken away. I don't think any of you would like your things to be taken away, which is what happens. If you refuse to pay for healthcare, you're fined at the end of the year through your tax returns. I'm not sure if you guys do tax returns. Anyone? Maybe, possibly? Yeah. It's not fun. So even if you refuse to pay for that health insurance, at the end of the year, it's gonna be taken out. You're either gonna have to pay a fine, or it's just gonna be taken out of your deductible. That kind of system takes away your money and prevents you guys from having the choice to say, I want something that I need, or I don't want something that I don't need. Oftentimes, we're told that we live in a free country, and for the most part, history seems to agree with that statement. But I don't think as good Americans and as good people that try to live a good life, we should settle for a system that allows the government to force us to give away our choice or our right to choose. For the United States, it's been a long history of trying to keep our freedoms to ourselves. We don't want other governments telling us we can't do something. We don't want our own government telling us we can't do something. So when they decide to take away our choice, I think it's up to all of us to decide that this is not something that we need to put up with. And I know, as the good people I know you guys to be, you guys should not let the government victimize the citizens that pay for the government. I think you guys are all a lot better than that. So, thank you.
So Vanessa, what did you think?
I think it was well organized. I liked your attention device. You knew what you were talking about, and you started out strong and ended strong.
Well, I kind of like the visualization at the beginning because this audience does fit into that category pretty clearly. There's a preview of what your supporting structure is going to be, so there is organization here, and I do see that you follow that. I think it's a little ambiguous what your point of view is at the beginning of the speech. I think I kind of understand the idea that you want to keep a little bit of suspense, but once we know what your subject is, I think we ought to know what your perspective is. Now, as you were speaking, it becomes a little bit clearer as you go along what you think, and that you're not just making these references at the beginning hypothetically, but that really reflects your point of view. It's not just a rhetorical question at this point, it is in fact a perspective. I thought that you had good information about the problems with, for instance, the Canadian healthcare system and the difficulties that they have delivering healthcare up there. There's an argument about redistribution and whether or not that seems like it's a fair thing to do, and you kind of summarize it at the end by suggesting that you like to keep the stuff that you've earned. I think there are arguments that suggest that other people are unfairly excluded from this process, and that's what this whole goal is to do, to address that issue. I think maybe that's a reservation issue that you need to spend a little bit more time on. I think there are ways to do that. You could point out that there are a variety of programs that are available for people who need that kind of assistance that didn't require us to create a nationalized system to take care of everybody, but rather, to plug the gaps where we had them, and that although it was an imperfect system, maybe it worked better than what we have. I think maybe that would have been a way of going at this. There's a philosophical perspective behind what you're talking about that I think can be justified. I just think you need to make a stronger justification for it than just the kind of personalized way that you present it at the end. Although I think that it does make an effective conclusion of the speech. I think that you do pretty good there. For the most part, I heard several source citations in the presentation and data being used to support your position. The cost issues, I think, were okay. There was one place where it was a little bit confusing. When you talked about kind of this twist about how healthcare was used as an employee benefit, and that was a way to get them credit for something that they wouldn't be taxed on, and how that's gone away. I think you need a little bit more explanation on what's happening there, because I didn't think it was as clear as you seem to think it is, and I think it's probably a good selling point for an audience here that is working at wages basically, and they're missing some opportunities that they would otherwise have gotten. The question is, do they have those? Do they have less opportunities? Has there been a change? I think it's not that far away from what was going on before that you couldn't make some comparisons. I think that would work pretty well. I think that you have a very solid presentation. You talk to people for the most part. I think you look in the direction of the audience most of the time. Sometimes it feels a little bit like you're kind of focusing on the folks in the front, but I didn't think that was a big deal. It was and it wasn't super noticeable. I just once in a while said, hey, in the back too, we're here also. A solid, like I said, solid presentation and good positive indicators with your gestures and your body positioning. All right, thank you.